The road to new beginning went through Chiba and Korakuen Hall for us to see on NJPW World, and what we saw were a lot of preview tags. There were some things worth noting, though. Ryohei Oiwa got a win, Zack Sabre Jr. was pinned again, among some other developments. We also heard from a former WWE talent that would be interested maybe in joining New Japan. And United Japan Pro Wrestling rolled out a heavy dose of empty cliches at a recent press conference. We'll try to make sense out of some of the corporate speak here on the show today. And then plus, we'll just talk about some of the events coming up in the New Japan calendar. So with Jeremy Finestone, I'm Stephen Conway. This is Speaking of Strong Style. Welcome to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the news, issues, and events surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'm Stephen, along with Jeremy here. We are covering this road to new beginning as we move toward what's going to be a fairly big show in Osaka. As it turns out, there's going to be a pretty big crowd there. But I have to say, Jeremy, this week has been New Japan in second, sometimes third gear. Has that been your impression of the shows we've seen? Jeremy's frozen. Okay, well, we'll just start with that then. We're off to a roaring start here on Speaking of Strong Style. We're going to be discussing the New Japan shows here, the Road to New Beginning. There was one in Chiba, which was a Blue Justice show. That was Yuji Nagata's promotion. And then we also had two shows at Korakuen Hall. And I see Colin is here. Dunstan, you're here. Glad to see you. You said you're a little sick today, Dunstan. Sorry about that. Sorry to hear that. Hope you feel better very soon. And Colin is saying that Kidani is still bumping his gums. Yeah, he sure is. So it's Kidani, the CEO of Bushi Road, the parent company of New Japan and Stardom, has had a rough week putting his foot in his mouth. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Recently, I was on a couple of our sibling shows here on the Fight Game Media Network, talking a lot about that. In fact, Colin, I was on the 5-Star Joshi show with Scott Edwards, so make sure you check that out. That's where we focused mostly on the women's side of things. Jeremy's back. Hey, Jeremy.
Oh, the bitch! We're snake bit today, buddy.
We are a little bit snake bit today. It's been a strange day in a lot of ways.
All right. Let's take a refresher here. Everybody, it's not our finest day if we come out of the gate here. These Road to New Beginning shows, when you have a show that sells out like New Beginning, it's clear you don't have to give your A effort going into the build-up for that one. And that's what we got here. We got a lot of stuff that you didn't have to see, but there's a little bit of salt and pepper on top of the matches for fun. But man, it was just 2.5 hours both nights after Blue Justice of just like the same kind of thing over and over and over. And we're kind of had a night off, and good for them. Get there, rest your bodies. A lot of character work. Blech.
It was not the most exciting stuff in the world. And I was just saying that I was on the 5-Star Joshi show with Scott Edwards last week. Also want to mention I had a blast with Sam and Mel, the Power Bombshells, on Sunday, talking about my experiences in Japan for Wrestle Kingdom Week. Really had a good time. It was a great talk. I hope everyone is able to check that out. And Colin already has. Wow, thanks, man. I appreciate that. It was good.
How do you like our new setup where our faces are on the sheet? So when we do our title screen, there's double. There's double the Steven and double the Jeremy. And here's the thing, Steven.
Who didn't want more of that?
I'm usually the guy with the hand on the face doing the smart guy gimmick, and I'm not this time. I kind of like it.
You're just grinning. You're just happy. So yeah,
happy-go-lucky guy.
So anyway, I had those other appearances. I hope you get a chance to check them out because we really talked in depth on the 5-Star Joshi show about Stardom, TJPW, and about Kidani's comments recently at that press conference or that media event, I guess they had there at the Tokyo Dome Hotel, where he bobbled things badly enough that at this United Japan Pro Wrestling conference, he was asked about them by the press and it was put in. This is amazing to me. It was put in the summary of that press conference on NJPW1972.com. They mentioned that a reporter asked, "You've made some inappropriate comments recently. What would you like to say?" I'm surprised they didn't edit that out, but they didn't. You got to give New Japan credit. They're facing it in that sense. They are. So they did that. Kadani might be best if Kadani gets a spokesperson and maybe does less of this himself. It just seems like this is not his forte.
He likes to be front and center, though. Like he truly enjoys being the spokesperson or the guy that is seen shepherding the way for everybody. He loves it.
I'm not sure he's liking it as much right now because everyone's just
he likes the Bob Iger that aspect of Bushi Road.
Oh, I don't know if Iger's messed up like that. Yeah, I guess he probably has over the years. But yeah, it's I understand what you mean. It's like Bob Iger in the sense that I have brought all this to you.
Yeah,
and he does like to portray himself in that light. And there's good and bad that comes with that. And right now, he's eating a lot of the bad side of that equation. So, but yeah, this conference, we're going to talk about that United Japan Pro Wrestling thing. A lot of corporate babble in that one. They had representatives from the major promotions involved with United Japan Pro. It's the same people that put together the All Together shows. Mm-hmm. And it's mostly a lobbying group, which we're going to talk about. And they had representatives from the front office. So Taro Okada was there. Kadani was there. People from the other promotions, Noah, All Japan and all that. And some of the talent as well. Yamashita was there and Micah was there. They had Shota Umino. So mix of on-air talent and front office at that. And so that was what was going on at the very beginning of the week. But the 23rd was the most recent Korakuen Hall show. We had one on the 22nd and then the Blue Justice. And let's start with these new beginning shows here. I honestly, Jeremy, I watched it. I had no notes from the Blue Justice show afterwards. It was simply a set of preview tags and each match had someone there specifically to take the pin, like a Honma, like a Takamichinoku, like a Bushi or Hartley Jackson. People that nothing wrong with them, but they just simply aren't on that rung of the ladder as the rest of the people in the match. It was very obvious who was going to get beat. And there were no surprises. They did it that way. So Blue Justice, they put Yuji Nagata in with the trios champs, Bolton, Yano, and Tanahashi against House of Torture for the good guy, bad guy dynamic. Bolton got the pin on Yujiro, which again, if anyone's going to get beaten that match, it's Yujiro. It was a very by the numbers show in Chiba that did draw okay. I mean, they draw a decent crowd. Yuji Nagata, not bad at drawing in Chiba. He seems to know how to promote his town.
This is one of the most popcorn, light, consistent shows you're going to get from New Japan every year. Like, nothing consequential is going to happen. It's essentially a charity show. It's WWE tribute to the troops, in a lot of ways, where it's just kind of it's a for charity show for specific interests that Yuji Nagata likes, and it works for Japan. I don't remember anything from the show. I literally watched it and I'm going through the thing and it's just, you said it. They were just matches and they were setting up new beginnings. They gave Nagata a platform for his show here in a good time. No complaints. It's like, this is what we come to New Japan for. I'm not here to say my time is being wasted. I watched it. There's nothing trivia that's going to come out of this show. It was just a show.
And the best match was probably Bishamon beating Hartley Jackson and Zack Sabre, but the War Dogs group of Connors, Maloney, and Kidd beating Bushi, Shingo, and Yota Tsuji was fine and all that. I mean, it wasn't anything bad, but yeah, certainly nothing consequential right here. But it drew 1,100 people.
There is one trivia bit I just realized about this show.
What's that?
This is the last day that we would have seen Drilla Maloney with a good haircut.
I guess so. Yeah, he did get his haircut in the break. There were a couple of days in between. But I'll tell you what, Jeremy, this show outdrew both of the Korakuen Hall shows later this week.
Good. It's a charity show. Get that money.
Yeah, just barely over 1,000 at Korakuen. So pretty weak crowds at Korakuen. But, I mean, look, no title matches. The fans in Tokyo are savvy enough to understand what these shows are, is that they are very paint by numbers house show.
Korakuen house show. They just happen to film.
And they didn't even, later on in this tour, we're going to start seeing a couple of miscellaneous title matches and things sprinkled throughout as main events. And this,
I got the lineup for us later on in the show.
So it's a Wednesday and a Thursday in Japan is when those two happen, the 22nd and 23rd. And people just, I think, decided we're good. We'll catch up later. But
we know when the big show is. We'll be
Yeah.
at the Edion Arena in Osaka for that one.
A lot of people are going to be there for that one. So, yeah. Now, the Korakuen Hall shows, let's go ahead and talk about those a little bit because there were some things I found interesting at Korakuen. So, on the 22nd and 23rd, both days, the show led off with, instead of Young Lion versus Young Lion, it was a Young Lion versus Hiroshi Tanahashi.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I did too. And it was Shoma Kato on the 22nd, and it was Katsuya Murashima on the 23rd. And I was thinking about this, Jeremy. It has to be a real thrill for these guys. When he announced his retirement, and you're a young lion, just kind of working your way up the card, if he hadn't talked to them about this beforehand, they had to be wondering, did I miss it? Am I ever going to get a singles match with Hiroshi Tanahashi? You know, you want to have that on the bucket list, right? You think, but you might have thought that perhaps this isn't going to happen for me. I'm not going to graduate to that level yet. But instead, Tanahashi is having his matches with each of the guys. Yasuda, unfortunately, still injured, but Daiki Nagai's turn is coming later. And Kato mostly sold for him, got a few mini comebacks. He got a Boston Crab rope break spot, and then the crab again for the loss. Basic stuff, but again, it had to be a big day for Shoma Kato.
Yeah, both those guys, what I really enjoyed about it, and I might go off on a little tangent here, is we're on his final road. They do the advertisement in the beginning for Hiroshi Tanahashi. He's on his final road, and he's got Togi Makabe at New Beginnings. But he's gonna wrestle everybody on the roster. He's got these young lions first. And this isn't gonna happen a whole lot in this next year on his final road. But Hiroshi Tanahashi beat their asses. Like he put them through their paces, like smacked them around, treated them like young lions. This wasn't like happy-go-lucky Tanahashi that we've seen in the last couple of years, friendly winner. No, this guy was like, no, I'm going to beat your ass. And for whatever reason, just these glimpses and glimmers of, Tanahashi winning and just kind of having these before he's going to have kind of an inevitable losing streak near the end of this year. This was just kind of nice, a nice palate cleanser, if you will.
And I noticed another thing with the Murashima match. It was different than the Kato match, rather, Shoma Kato. You can see that he has a little bit better timing than Kato. It all happened in fits and starts, meaning he would get his mini comeback and then he would sell for a while, and then he would get a mini comeback and sell for a while. With Murashima, there was a little bit more back and forth. He kind of understood when to get a shot in to stay alive and then sell a little bit. It wasn't just station to station. Now I'm going to sell for a minute. Now I'm going to come back until he cuts me off. Kato or Murashima's sense of timing on that stuff is a little bit ahead of Kato. I'm, picking nits, yes, but I'm starting to see why Shoma was in that young lion thing with Yasuda and the guy on the tag tour while Murashima was having matches with the main roster guys. I can kind of see why they just thought he's a little bit further advanced there. He just seems to have a little bit better hold of the psychology than
I could also see what you're saying about wrestlers sometimes when they're learning the craft. I noticed that they're trying to string along sequences. Like they have their spots and they have to go from one to that and then get from that to the next spot. And some of these young lions have a real difficulty transitioning seamlessly without like it feeling like they're doing that mental calculus in their head about how they're going to get there. And it's just that hitch in the timing. It's the reps. It's all these things. It'll get there. It'll be fine, but you're not there yet. And that's why you're a young lion.
It's intriguing to me to be able to really compare apples to apples. Like each one is going to get a singles match with one of the best of this generation. Now, physically, Tanahashi can't do what he used to do, but it is going to give us a nice little comparison that's actually apples to apples among where Nagai, Kato, and Murashima are. I'm curious to see how Nagai does. Nagai certainly has the attitude, but is he going to look like he's counting steps? You know, is he gonna, you know, or how smooth is he going to be with Tanahashi?
This is like the Tanahashi chart stat sheet, you know, like when everybody's done, everybody has like their metrics of what they're good and what they're bad at, and then you measure it against everybody else. You just kind of see it. So it looks like you're building your character sheet for role playing.
But as somebody who's really into the weeds on New Japan, like anybody who's watching this show is, you know, and certainly as we are, the development of the young lions is one of the more intriguing subplots that goes on throughout the year. I really enjoyed this part. And I mean, especially when you see them come up like Fujita and Oiwa and Shota and all that.
Yeah.
When you're there for years.
The way they do it over the, like, they've elevated and they've sped up the process. And so, like,
you're trying to get them. I don't know if there's evidence of that yet. It still seems like it takes an awfully long time.
That was the whole thing. They're trying to speed up the process, but what you're seeing is that naturally this just takes time. There are some things you just cannot speed up, and that's just how it works.
So we'll see how Nagai does. And of course, they're going to lose all these. But USVA guy has an interesting comment, by the way, about the Blue Justice shows. He said, what's fun is going to the different gaming and fandom-related shops around the area of the show. Nagata has Blue Justice shirts that he takes everywhere, and you can get old versions, which is very cool. That was one thing. The shop, Jeremy, directly across the hall, and I mean like 5 steps away from Pile Driver in Harajuku, Minoru Suzuki's shop, is a shop that is themed with wrestling and MMA stuff. And they have Blue Justice things. And I had heard that Yuji Nagata had been there earlier in the week. So you could, if you had gotten there at the right time, Minoru Suzuki is on one side of the hallway, go out 5 more steps, you're in a shop with Yuji Nagata sitting in it signing Blue Justice shirts. So the Blue Justice thing is everywhere. And I have a big soft spot for it. Yuji Nagata was a victim of some Inokiism in the early 2000s when the company was kind of on its rear end because of poor decisions about Inoki and incorporating MMA into pro wrestling that didn't work. And we've gone over it a lot on this show that it was trying to think out of the box when it seemed like MMA was going to take over the world, and it didn't quite go well. And Nagata ended up in the middle of some of that. And they put him in real MMA fights that he wasn't prepared for. And he kind of got eaten alive in a little bit in that system. To see him come out the other side and still become a legend within New Japan, I think is an interesting journey. I find it satisfying. And, you know, he's a guy that went all the way from those very dark early days to battling Tanahashi on top. And so to see him all these years later, still a popular figure and still relatively healthy overall.
He's great. I have a lot of wrestling to me.
He's the leader of the dads to me, so to speak. You know, the Tenzan, Makabe, Kojima, the 50-year-olds that are working with the young guys a lot in the dojo. Yeah. And to me, it's just satisfying for me. I have a soft spot for Nagata, so to see him drawing well in Chiba and people still have good
you're never going to hear me talk shit about Yuji Nagata. That's just it. I'm talking like, what is there bad to say about the guy, right?
No, nothing. And even in the Dome, he got a warm reception. It wasn't like an exploding pop, but everybody there was like, "Oh, Yuji Nagata's here for the early show match."
It would be nice that Yuji Nagata would show up somewhere of prominence on American wrestling and get just a really warm welcome in the next few years.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone in U.S. wrestling promotion that's particularly interested in doing that. And so I'm happy with him just kind of doing his thing, enjoying himself, and, you know, spreading the advocacy of pro wrestling in Japan.
He is headed overseas. He said in either the New Year's Dash or the Tokyo Dome post-match comments that he didn't have very many matches in New Japan in 2024. And he said he'd probably have fewer in 2025 because he's going to be competing overseas. I'm curious to see where that is. If he goes to the UK with Rev Pro or MLW, which works with Kojima a lot. He doesn't have much.
Isn't a big deal to me personally. You know,
no, but I'm curious to see where he turns up. Like, what does he have in mind by overseas? He's not a lucha guy, so I don't think Mexico is it. So I'm thinking North America.
Yeah, I don't think that AEW would appreciate him, and so I'm kind of leery of trying to take advantage of his prestige there. I mean, anything's possible. If Tony Khan is a huge Yuji Nagata fan, he'll do right by the guy. And I just want him to have one great night of appreciation in the States. You know, that's really it. Like, I want that guy to get his flowers in one really good event.
Yeah, fair enough. So from the 22nd, I wanted to mention this also. Shota Umino, Master Wato, and Tomohiro Ishii versus Francesco Akira, Jacob Austin Young, and Great Khan. Probably the best match of that night. If you're going to go see anything out of that one, I would watch that one. I thought everyone was, if not on fire, at least I think that's the closest anyone got to fourth gear in that one. And Ishii obviously knows how to
the main event was all right.
And Akira seemed very, the main event was fine. I'm getting to that. But I thought that was the best match of the night. And Wato and Francesco Akira especially looked like they were motivated to really show up.
Akira got a fire under his ass. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he seems he really wants to prove things because they sort of said goodbye, not permanently, but for now, for Catch 2-2, and he's going to go at it as a singles. And he really seems like he's on a mission to prove that he belongs at the top echelon. And that means working harder at the house shows than other people do. There's no T-shirt Akira going on here. He's giving it his all to try to stand out.
You think we're getting in a Ishii Akira match anytime soon?
It could be. I mean, they
feel
might.
Like they were kind of inching towards that. He's kind of that gatekeeper guy, you know? He's that guy in New Japan that if you want to be a heavyweight, you kind of got to go through Ishii. Yeah. And I wonder.
Desperado and Goto against Fujita and Zack in the main event was also pretty damn good. That was entertaining to me. Yes. So those are worth the time.
They both had really interesting like post-match stuff as well. The Shota Umino match, the United Empire. Great Khan went out into the stands and took one of the little girl's Shota Umino light stick, right? And he was going to break it. And then they set up the sequence where Shota Umino comes out and just beats Great Khan's ass. Like, just throws him into the post, knocks him down, gives the toy light back to the kid, and everybody claps. And really just, it was pure audience manipulation to get, like, Shota Umino built up for the babyface from the ground up. We will revisit this at the next show, what they did following that. But I also liked Goto being positioned as like an elder of Hontai chaos, that kind of mishmash in the post-match, and calling El Desperado back for the handshake, really just kind of signifying that he sees El Desperado as like an equal, a leader, one of the guys in Hontai leading the whole thing forward. That was what I got from the show without the translation.
It kind of cracks me up a little bit too, is that Goto would try to get Desperado to do some of the signature chaos spots, like the war drums where everybody beats on the guy's back at the same time, and Desperado was like, "Yeah, that's not really my thing." You know, Desperado takes a while to warm up. Ask Wato. You know, it takes a while for Despe
it's a consistent character trait of his part, where he's just like, you know, let me just get comfortable with this before let me dip my toes in the water before I decide to like jump all the way in. For as crazy of a wrestler he is very cautious about like who he spends his time with.
And we also saw on the 23rd, then moving ahead to the next night at Korakuen, Robbie Eagles teamed with Zack. So Zack teamed with Fujita the first night, and the other half of the junior tag champions the second night. He and Eagles took on Goto and Yo that time. And Goto ended up pinning Zack Sabre Jr. with a roll-up. And we saw this consistently. Like, Fujita took the fall the night before, but no one was winning with anybody's big finishers. None of this stuff was definitive at all. But Goto did roll up Zack and got a pin, a rare scramble pinfall loss for Zack, who again can make anything look realistic though, and look good. But
it feels like a big deal when Zack Sabre Jr. gets pinned.
Yeah, and it goes to his job being to bridge the gap here from generation to generation. Zack is not being portrayed as a long-term dominant champion. He's there for a different reason. He's there to make other people look good, and that means carrying guys, taking some losses when necessary, and it's not about making it the Zack Sabre Jr. era. It is about setting up what comes next, and that does mean looking a little vulnerable sometimes and creating that seed of doubt. And of course, there is a big debate going on as to who is going to win that world title match in New Beginning in Osaka, which is probably the reason the tickets to sales
I'm ready
are so
to
good.
talk about this one.
Well, we're not yet. We got a whole. It's not too far away to do a preview on that one.
Why can't we talk about this one?
Well, we can't not right now. We've got other things here to talk about.
Okay.
But I did think it's intriguing to see how Zack is handling the build up to this. Of course, you're going to want to make the challenger look good. That can be done without the champ getting pinned, and but still, there it did add a little extra momentum to Goto, which was already pretty strong, going in there and pinning Zack Sabre Jr. But again, no finisher. Nobody hit a big move. It was out of a pin scramble, which carries its own message.
Everything is just a little ambiguous. It's nothing definitive, like you said, but we will revisit this whole conversation when it's time to revisit this conversation.
We're going to do it quickly because I did want to talk about the action from that night. Another message was sent, I felt, in the main event, Jeremy, that Ryohei Oiwa Yoshihashi match, which wasn't bad. It was a pretty good match, but it was that Oiwa's win was so definitive. He pinned Yoshihashi in the middle of the ring, but not just, he dominated the last part of the match. I'm going to go over the ending sequence here. This was after Yoshihashi got his last move in. They were holding on to each other's wrists, and they had a short arm clothesline battle where one was giving it and then the other was. One was giving it to the other. And Oiwa won that short arm clothesline battle. That was the end of Yoshihashi's offense. But after that, he hit a doctor bomb for 2. Then he went up to the top rope and hit a splash, 2. Then he put an arm submission on. Yoshihashi got to the ropes. Then he got a sleeper for a while. Now, in the middle of all that, Yoshihashi managed to get like a victory roll for a flash 2 count, but not the pin. And then he got the sleeper on Yoshihashi, let go of the sleeper, hit the grip, that spinning clothesline, and
left arm lariat.
And it was just a clear signal that Oiwa was going over, and this guy's still in the mix. Don't forget about him. No, he didn't have a big Wrestle Kingdom moment because the card was full, but this was a clear signal to me, Jeremy, from New Japan. It's like, don't forget about this guy. No, he didn't have anything big in the dome, but Yoshihashi put him over like a champ.
So you're saying the positioning of Ryohei Oiwa, who is second to the IWGP champion in his own stable, just beat the tag team partner of the number 1 contender for the IWGP championship.
Yeah.
And you want to tell me that you're not supposed to take this guy seriously?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, but he was a guy that unfortunately got lost in that week's shuffle, and you can only feature so many people at any given time.
Well, but it wasn't enough time.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
4 months ago, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Who's been grinding through the entire year had to have matches first. This is not a hot take.
Well, I'm just saying that it was a clear signal that this guy is not a mid-carder. It's somebody still to be taken very seriously. And
good for New Japan that they could do that. You know what I mean? Like that their depth right now is. Sorry.
They don't always just put a guy over that strong though in a singles main event.
No, I like what they're doing with him. They're trying to get him to that level of Shota and Yota Tsuji and Yuya Uemura when he came back, because he had a very strong start to the G1. It's his time to place him among the rest. And right now, I am just incredibly excited as I'm thinking about it that they're able to pace it out so that post Wrestle Kingdom, you can elevate this guy so that he looks strong going to the New Japan Cup. And when we're talking about it and we get to the New Japan Cup, you can legitimately say, oh, Ryohei Oiwa could probably go pretty far in this thing, just based off of this one win. That's awesome.
Okay, so I cut you off because I wanted to make sure we talked about Oiwa here and got it kind of in match order right now. Coming out of this, obviously the focus is on this world title match with Goto and Zack, although the New Beginning card is pretty loaded. I mean, that's going to be a really nice night of action, but it seems to be on everybody's lips. Can Goto finally get that win that has eluded him for his entire career. How do you feel about it at this stage? You obviously had some things on your mind regarding that earlier, but where are you on Goto? Is he finally going to get to be champion?
The thing is Dunstan had the question after the Korakuen Hall show, is there any real doubt that Goto doesn't have a chance to win the world title? Which I think is what he means to say is it now or never with Hirooki Goto? If he doesn't win now, is that it for him? And
feels like it,
I have
doesn't
to think it is.
Yeah, feels like it.
I also think there's a more than 50% chance he could win this match.
Mm-hmm.
Like that shocking upset when it would do a lot to cement his legacy with New Japan. There'd be a lot of people who don't constantly watch New Japan that would turn around and just be like, what? Huh? Zack Sabre Jr. lost to Hirooki Goto and wouldn't really get the ramification. It would probably seep in over a couple of days. But at the same time, Hirooki Goto is the perfect guy to be defending the IWGP title during the New Japan Cup and also be possibly a transitional champion between the two. You could have Zack Sabre Jr. lose to anybody. You could have him lose to the presumed winner of the Cup. You could have him lose after that. You could do whatever. But I think it's more exciting if you have Hirooki Goto beat him and then you go from there.
I have also said on the record here, I think David Finlay is going to be the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion in 2025. He's the perfect guy to take that off of Goto for a lot of reasons. The good versus evil part of it, the sentimental victory that Goto got over him, the New Japan Cup match that never happened, all of these things. Well, it was more Tsuji and Finlay in the Cup, but that Finlay may have been going to win the Cup. Maybe it was, we don't know, but he never got that chance to. He wasn't eliminated from the Cup. He had to pull out. A lot of subtext to that match is all I'm saying right there, especially after the Korakuen Hall match last year during the G1. So, yeah, I would put it right now a little bit in Goto's favor as to who wins at New Beginning. But they could still just have it be that he has that one last attempt and dies trying. That's also a story to tell, and they could do it there. But it's not 100%. I'm like 55 Goto right now.
Yeah, I was like 55 was kind of where I was at. It's like just kind of leaning that way. The thing I kind of harped on a couple weeks ago, maybe even last week, was that it just didn't feel like they were touching on the aspects of the Goto story that would make a world title win like consequential. Like his family was there against him when he fought Finlay in that one match and he didn't win, and his father died last year, and he had the really like strong New Japan Cup showing as a result. There's a lot of things that they've started to bring up again that I was hoping that they would, because it would really start to make it feel like it was like the reason and the drive and like the flair for the gold, but Hirooki Goto campaign, and it's starting to kind of happen in the New Japan, like social media and some of the articles, and there feels like a groundswell. And I think the best thing that ever happened to Hirooki Goto was the response from everyone who's like, hell yeah, I'm going to be at that main event if Hirooki Goto's in it.
Yeah. It does speak volumes too, doesn't it? Just maybe we did not understand just how much the Japanese fans like Goto. We knew that they did, but that whole sort of almost at the top of the mountain, but not quite, that's kind of relatable to people. That a lot of people just want to see that last push to the top and to get that one big win. And that is a story that a lot of people relate to. They seem to be here for it. And to see Goto get this moment, it's cool. What else is it? Go ahead.
I think it's more than that, dude. Think about it. Like, Tanahashi can't go anymore. Naito is Naito. Like, Hirooki Goto is the elder statesman. He is everything that New Japan has been for the last 20 years, right? Like, when they see Hirooki Goto, they see the guy that was working those tabs with Yoshihashi every freaking night of the pandemic. Like he believes New Japan. He never left. He never thought about going to AEW. He never thought about all these things. He's always been with New Japan. He has been New Japan through and through. And I think those fans see it. I think they know it, and they want this for him.
Well, all right. Well, we'll see what they get it in February. It's coming up.
We're going to be talking about this one for the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be a fun one.
All right. So that's the Korakuen Hall shows, and nothing until next Thursday. By the way, they're not just on NJPW World, but anywhere. They're off until the 30th when they go to Sendai at Miyagi, the Sun Plaza Hall, and that'll be on NJPW World next Thursday on the 30th, and that'll be the next show. And I
will be able to watch that full show. I changed my schedule, so I will now have enough time to watch a show before this show without watching it in my car or on work breaks, and I will legitimately be able to watch these shows now on Thursday.
It will be a card of preview tags again.
Hey, you know what? It'll be a diligently watched card of preview tags.
All right. United Japan Pro Wrestling. Should we talk about this, Jeremy?
If you want,
well. So United Japan Pro Wrestling is that group of promotions that have gotten together and did the All Together shows and all this. So they had a press conference, and they mentioned that their primary thing is not to co-promote shows consistently. They said that would happen when circumstances dictated and when it was possible and when it seemed like a good idea, basically. But they said mostly they're a lobbying group. This is a group of things. They said during the pandemic, they learned a lesson, and that is that they need to have best practices and a way to deal with all the various municipalities. What they found was All Japan, DDT, Noah, New Japan, all these different groups here around the Sendai Girls and everybody that you can think of, Big Japan. They had all kinds of trouble trying to decide how to deal with the pandemic. Fans in every other seat, should they just do shows in front of no one? Should they? It was a mishmash of things. And every time a company tried to go into a province or to a town, they had to deal with the local groups and to make sure that safety was being followed. And they had to do that 6 or 7 different times for all the different groups. The idea of United Japan Pro Wrestling is to, when crises like that hit, to have best practices, share information, not necessarily on booking or wrestling style or sharing talent with each other. It's not the same as that. But just if another pandemic breaks out, how do we get people back in the building safely? And that way, when a building or a local government deals with pro wrestling, they don't have to deal with 9 different promoters. They're dealing with United Japan Pro Wrestling. And then all these different companies followed suit there. And so that's really what most of this is. And they had 7 requirements to join UJPW, and they announced it. They're incorporated now, by the way. They said the 7 requirements are an organization to be regularly running, active in Japan. Okay. They have to be a legally recognized company. So no one and dones. You have to have at least 1 contracted wrestler working for them. That gets murky. You have to have annual revenue of at least 50 million yen. So that comes out to $321,000 US, or about 260 pounds sterling. Revenue per year. Yeah. Annual revenue. That's important. Yeah. Revenue. You have to have been at least established for 2 years. No fly-by-nights. You have to have a corporate compliance system in place for wrestlers and staff, probably so they can actually enforce these rules they're talking about, and to share in a vision of betterment for pro wrestling space at large, even in competition with other members, which is really vague, but we get the idea there. And they also mentioned that there can be supporting members. So these would be sort of not full-fledged members, but associates. Where annual revenue and the contracted wrestler distinctions will be waived. And I was thinking about this, and that is probably for promotions that still matter, but only run sporadically. And what I mean by that is like Tatsumi Fujinami's group, or Surrealism, where they have some of the best talent out there and book them for these shows, but they don't run often enough to contract wrestlers or to make 50 million yen over the course of a year, but are still working with New Japan, All Japan, TJPW, Stardom talent. You know how Suriism is kind of an all-star game a little bit. Sometimes she has connections with everybody. Fujinami's group uses a lot of interesting people from across promotions. So they don't want to leave those people all out in the cold, but they want it to be only the most serious of them, I suppose. Jeremy, does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, a trade organization is a trade organization, right?
Yeah.
They're working towards united goals. It's like having all the tech giants, you know, Facebook, Meta, like Amazon, Apple, all cooperating with each other to get like their general business interest all kind of, you know, along the same way. You know, that's what this is the example of what these Japanese wrestling companies are doing as well.
It's a less frightening version of that than the one you described.
Know what I'm saying, though? Like,
oh, I do. Yeah.
Thinking
absolutely.
about it, it's like this is what it is. They're all banding together because they have mutual interests, and working united helps them get through whatever like general interest that they have a lot easier than if they all like attack piecemeal instead of like a coordinated effort to achieve their interests.
Right.
Does this mean, you know, like Noah is going to work more with WWE and now WWE is going to get a foothold with New Japan? Probably not.
No.
You know, like I don't think this has anything to do with any of those kind of things. Yeah, it just, if a company is taken over by WWE, they're not going to be in the trade organization. That's that.
I think that's about right. And they announced a mission, several points here. And like I said, most of this is kind of corporate babble. We'll try to parse out what they actually mean by it. First one is simple: introducing more people to pro wrestling. Well, I think that's every company's mission, right? And then this might be a part here that requires some cooperation. Elevating its status is mentioned. Doing charitable activities such as the shows benefiting earthquake victims, which is what a lot of the All Together shows were. That would be a way.
In a Yellow Justice show.
Yeah, and this organization perhaps working to have wrestling be part of the fabric of certain towns, regions, wouldn't hurt. One of the things that has happened over the years is in Japan, wrestling has lost a lot of its mainstream I don't want to say appeal, but a lot of its mainstream presence.
Connection to the
everything changes over the years. I do understand that, but I mean, at one point, pro wrestling was on national television twice a week in Japan, and later on, they were on, you know, in prime time is what I'm trying to say right there. And later on, some of those slots, those TV slots, moved to late night, and some of them were in the dead of night. You know, I remember like All Japan was a half an hour down to a half an hour show at midnight on Saturdays. You know, when it had been in prime time on Fridays and all that. So over the years, they've kind of gone more and more niche instead of being more prominent in things, and a lot of competition out there. We all know this with channels and things. In the United States, I don't know, wrestling used to be on twice a week in the 1950s on national television in prime time. Things change. Of course they do. But part of what they want to do is elevate the status, make it less of a niche thing for a very small segment of the population and make it just a more mainstream pursuit. And that's going to be a difficult, you know, if everyone knew how to do that, they'd have done it, right, Jeremy? So just saying you want to do it and figuring out a way to do it is another thing. And then the next item basically doubles back on the first item, which is expand the marketplace in Japan. Well, what's the difference between that and trying to introduce more people to pro wrestling? So a lot of this is kind of double talk.
I mean, it is, and that's fine. Let me ask you this. Do you think we're going to get another All Together show anytime soon out of this, or do you think this is all just behind the scenes?
Most of this is going to be behind the scenes because those shows are difficult to put together. I think there will be again, and it'll be for charity. I think we're going to see stuff like that, but maybe, you know, having something to do with the snow festival in Sapporo. I'm just throwing things out. None of this was outlined in the thing, but the snow festival in Sapporo, the Sakura festival with the cherry blossoms and all that. Like there are these festivals that pop up if they can get a show based around that. You know, the way pro wrestling in America sometimes comes around to the state fairs, big shows at state fairs. The world class wrestling in Dallas used to do a big state show during the state fair at the Cotton Bowl, and they were kind of part of the fair that day. Stuff like that can't hurt, right? You know, to just do a show where people can wander in and out. Snow Festival is going to have to be indoors, of course, but I guess what I'm saying is just make it a little bit more part of mainstream Japanese culture is a big goal right there. But again, if it were that easy, they just would have been doing it all along. And then the other thing they mentioned. Oh, go ahead if you have a point. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, you hit the point earlier where it's just like the interest changed. You know, when the pandemic hit and people in Japan and all over the world just became more addicted to their phones and the attention spans and all these things. You know, you're going to need a hot angle. You're going to need something that catalyzes the audience over in Japan that makes them think like, oh, wrestling is the biggest thing in the world again right now. Sometimes that's happening here in the United States where for one night here or there, like you can't talk anything about wrestling. Japan needs that, needs a moment, needs like an iconic like event. And I don't know what that is. And I don't know if there are wrestling personalities ready for that or even positioned for that right now, but there will be soon. Like it's not going to be forever with the doldrums without something like that.
Yeah, it's got to be so frustrating, especially for New Japan, because that show at the Dome in January of 2020 almost filled it. You know, it's like over 35,000 people or something like that. It was a big crowd in the Dome, and then the damn pandemic just killed it dead, and it hasn't recovered. And the fans are less demonstrative; they're quieter. I think
Tanahashi going to pack that thing, man.
Yeah,
I think people will be climbing from the rafters for that.
I hope so. They're also going to have regular meetings with government agencies, like I mentioned. There will be policies on health and safety, again, going back to the doubling back on the pandemic stuff, not so that doesn't create the chaos it created last time. They can create best practices. And but none of this was concrete. And I thought this was interesting. They said health and safety. Okay. And so a guy raised his hand at the press conference and just said, does this mean you'll be talking about pensions for pro wrestlers and taking care of people when they're hurt, which is something that they apparently have in boxing. There is a group that will help take care of old boxers, which I think is wonderful. We should have that here. There's a lot of things we should have in the U.S. that we don't. And not
the politics on it.
Well, I'm not talking about politics.
No, I hear you.
We all have issues, and I'm not talking about this. I'm talking within pro wrestling. I find it very frustrating that companies that
the lack of care
that makes billions upon billions of dollars doesn't even bother to take care of people who have
the lack of care or diligent responsibility for all wrestlers after they've been employed by some of these companies and making sure that all of their medical issues have been
I didn't mean to make that sound like a political statement, but
given how much money they are now currently making and raking in, I can see why you could. You know, I think you could afford that. Whether you're going to do that or not is not for me to say, but you could afford it.
Yeah, and the NFL has weaknesses in its thing. It doesn't take care of its players the way it should, but there is a process a little bit for a bit of a it's not enough, but it's a bit of a pension for some of those guys.
When I was getting,
but anyway, what I'm saying is though that question landed with an absolute thud. That was just like, well, that's something we're looking into. Like, oh, is it? Oh, it's something you're looking into, is it? So in other words, no.
We'll talk about this afterwards, and I'll give you all the information you need.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, we want health and safety for our wrestlers. Oh, so you're going to provide some sort of care for them? Oh, no, we're not going to.
One of the things that I always found fascinating growing up was the different ways that contracts work for all the sports organizations growing up, like the NFL players and the baseball players and the NBA players, all of their agreements and how their contracts work, how they got paid, what was guaranteed, and what all these agreements that were in place between players unions and league unions. Man, that was an education growing up. You know, that took a lot of joy out of, hey, this guy should play for this team.
Yeah. It's just interesting, and But I guess there is something like that for boxing in Japan, and they were
good.
saying, well, it's something we're looking into in wrestling. But I mean, it's hard. Again, if it were easy, everybody do it. But those are some of the things they mentioned in that mission. But it was funny, and during that thing they did say, is there some sort of fine system in place for inappropriate comments like the one Kadani made? Like, we're basically, it's like, going forward, are you guys going to fine each other or punish each other when someone does something so knuckleheaded like Kadani did?
The Punisher.
Yeah. So again, they dodged that question as well. So this was a lot of corporate talk. They're just simply going to try to make things smoother for them with local governments, basically, is really what the most important thing about this is. And then do some charity shows once in a while. But they also specifically said there are no plans for a United Japan Pro Wrestling event currently. Doesn't mean there won't be in the future, but right now there is no altogether.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to be doing one. The
logistics are a nightmare.
I mean, I was thinking about it. I saw it, but behind the scenes, it was just a very busy week, just trying to get through the shows. Is about all the bandwidth that I had. Steven contacted me earlier today. Like, hey, here's a list of the stuff. I'm like, great, let's do it. So he'd read it off the United Japan stuff to me, and it's just like, cold nuts and bolts, man. You know, like, is it going to affect the fabric of what we watch on New Japan inherently? Not really. Like, all the things that will be affecting on the shows and the programming that we watch will be little things that somehow make its way onto the screen, if anything at all. You know, like, this is all just keeping the business healthy, and I'm good with that.
Other thing I wanted to mention here, and it's just very brief, and I don't think we're going to have a whole lot more to go today, just because it's not the busiest.
It's a light week in the New Japan world.
Intrigued by one thing, though, which was the former Baron Corbin. Tom Pestock had some interesting comments over the course of the week, and one of the things he said was that he liked the idea of spending a year in New Japan, maybe over going to AEW. All this could be negotiating tactics in various ways. But one of the things he said,
the game, man.
Yeah, he's playing the game, but he just said that, you know, he didn't want to just be one of the guys that, how did he put it? Just one of the guys that goes over to AEW and you'd be, here's another former WWE guy. Great. Yeah, he said he would rather have a bit new experiences or work for New Japan for a year and expand his repertoire, his style, that type of thing, which I thought was interesting because when he was let go, Jeremy, I thought this is the kind of guy that maybe New Japan could do something with. I'm not talking about making him world heavyweight champion, but Baron Corbin had to deal with a lot of crummy creative in WWE.
You think?
But in the ring, he improved dramatically over the course of his career. And toward the end of his WWE run, he was not a bad worker at all.
No.
And I think he's a guy that could be carried to better things by being in there with higher quality wrestlers like we see in New Japan. He's got size, which you can't teach. He has a style that might work there. So I'm not against this, is all I'm saying. If they brought Tom Pestock in, I wouldn't want him to get, you know, the rocket push all the way to the top, like maybe like what we saw with Riddle and Nemeth. I'm not talking about throwing a belt on him immediately, but if he wanted to come in and work for a while, I'm down.
Bring Jack Perry back on over to New Japan, give him a tag team, call him the scapegoat, and let him run wild.
Yeah, there you go. I mean,
I'm for it. Well, I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm not trying to be a dick here, but I would not be shocked if this is what Pestock has said after he reached out to AEW and they politely told them that they weren't interested. You know, like, you go to the next kind of promotion. Frankly speaking, Pestock could use a fantastic makeover. I thought he was great back in NXT before they ever brought him up to the main roster. With
the Lone Wolf gimmick. The Lone Wolf gimmick.
Strong, it was great.
It was strong.
I enjoyed all of that stuff. It wasn't until they brought him up there and Vince McMahon made him almost a reflective mouthpiece of, like, the contempt the company had for the fans.
Yeah.
You know, like,
well said.
He was put in a position to be reflective of the worst creative that a pro wrestling company has put out in the last 10 years. Like, this is flat out, like, there's no argument here. The creative that Baron Corbin was put front, center, and representative of was atrocious. He was a company man. He did everything that they asked him to do. And when all was said and done, and he was sent down to NXT, and he was in that tag team with fucking Braun Breaker, that was awesome. They were a great tag team together. They had a great time. And he just said, like, they're not bringing me back. And I'm like, I get it. Like, they used you and they dried you up and they just left you on the side of the road. And that sucks. And go out to New Japan. If you're hungry and you want to kick some ass, I think you can do it in New Japan. You are not a dumb guy. You know how this business works.
Yeah.
People seem to like you. Show us. Show us what you got.
If he is willing to do this as well, to me, it scores points for him because
he's doing blood sport.
It shows dedication to wrestling, not just being in WWE, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a matter of, sometimes, people get cut from WWE and they leave the business like, well, there's no point in doing anything else. Well, you didn't love pro wrestling as much as you like the idea of being on national TV in WWE. There's a difference. And if he actually wants to do a year in Japan, that's no small undertaking. If he's as dedicated enough to wrestling to try to do that, I respect that.
I'm totally into it. And I just thought about it. And I thought about the way he looks and his work rate and all this stuff. He is a modern day version of Jake the Snake Roberts with a good work rate. That's how I feel about him.
Jake was a pretty great worker.
He was a great worker, but I don't know how great of a worker he would be in 2025 with the way that he held up. And I think that, Pestock kind of reminds me of what Jake the Snake kind of brought to the table. He's got the character work, he's able to portray it, and he's got a good move set in the ring. He's working the way that his body type should. And he wrestles a style that realistically, if you were that size and that,
he uses his size well. Yeah, that's
he works a style that complements his body frame well, and he moves around the ring accordingly. And that's what I'm trying to say is that the comps there to good wrestlers is real. And if you want to see somebody cut loose, I have a feeling that if Pestock came to New Japan, he'd rip shit up.
I mean, we'll see if it ever happens. Like you said, that might have been a negotiating thing with AEW also.
He should not be in AEW.
It doesn't feel like a good spot for him. It just doesn't feel
it's both bad for AEW because they got to stop bringing in old ex-WWE guys, number one. And number two, they're not going to be committed to him to the level that they should be committed to the stars that they're growing. If he wants a job and he wants to show up and occasionally wrestle here or there, and he can get paid for it, great, AEW thing. If he is legitimately interested in rebuilding what his brand is in pro wrestling, he has a real opportunity in New Japan, like I said, to fucking kick some ass.
It's interesting how promotions that are built up to rival WWE consistently start out as we are the showcase for new young talent that WWE has ignored. And in a few years, they turn into the WWE Senior Tour. And that happened with TNA. Remember when TNA started, weekly pay-per-views, new exciting talent you haven't seen, people that WWE missed.
You can't let that hot free agent off the market, man.
Yeah, no. And then years later, it's Kevin Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, and Kevin Nash lumbering down to the ring to try to do stuff. And then, Kurt Angle had a good run. Not crapping on Kurt Angle on there, but it became the WWE Senior Tour, and now look at what we're seeing in AEW. That
somebody called AEW scene right now the main event mafia. AEW's main event mafia. Yeah, that's it's rough.
And so Pestock would get lost in that shuffle.
You would. I am a full advocate of Pestock in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Yes, I am. Okay. What else we got? We got anything?
Not a whole lot else. So. We can wrap this up here in a bit, but I did want to mention the Miyagi show. So when we come back, this will be the same day. So this is what's going on at the Sendai Sun Plaza Hall. So the kickoff match, Shomakato and Daiki Nagai. That's the only singles match on the show. That's just the Young Lion match there at the beginning. After that, we have Murashima and Yoshihashi against Oiwa and Hartley Jackson. So that's a post-view match instead of a preview match. We've already seen Yoshi and Oiwa, but there you go. Second match, Jado, Makabe, Umino, and Phantasmo. Phantasmo rejoining the tour against Jacob Austin Young, Francesco Akira, Grado Cobb. That should be the name of that team. Grado Khan and Jeff Cobb. So we have Cobb and Phantasmo rejoining the fray. Taka Michinoku and Taichi will take on Taichi Ishimori and Sanada, which probably won't be too bad at all. Tomoaki Honma and Tomohiro Ishii against Hiromu and Naito. So we're seeing a lot of Hiromu and Naito teaming together, obviously with their, they can't do preview tags. Nick and Matt aren't in Japan. So then we have a trios match, Bushi, Shingo, and Yota Tsuji against Connors, Maloney, and Kid. That's the best of the War Dogs there. Never open weight 6-man tag team championship match. So we have a title match on this show, second from the top. It is Yano, Bolton, and Tanahashi against Sho, Yujiro, and Narita. That is House of Torture against the trio there from Hantai and Chaos. And finally, the main event in Sendai, Yo, El Desperado, and Hirooki Goto versus Robbie Eagles, Kosei Fujita, and Zack Sabre Jr.
All right. I have one more thing I forgot about. I have a bonus review of a match, Steven.
Oh, okay. And we also have another question from Dunstan I want to get to. Awesome. Dunstan's not feeling well. We're definitely going to answer his questions.
You want to do the Dunstan, and then I'll do my review, and then we'll wrap it up.
He said, after Naito and Tana are gone, who do I think will be the new big 4 or 6 of New Japan? I think we are setting up for the very people that are looking strong right now. I believe, well, Finlay is going to be one of them, I think, for a little while. Also, I think we're going to be seeing Shota. Yota Tsuji, I feel very confident in being part of that big time mix.
That's 3.
Yeah. Oiwa, I think, is going to be in there. I'm not as sold on Uemura as everybody else is. I think he has the potential, but I think that's coming. So I think in the heavyweight division, we're going to be seeing like guys of that generation. And certainly Zack's going to be in the mix. I'm saying that long term, it's going to be that group.
But you don't think long term Zack Sabre Jr.?
I think his job is to make that generation that I just talked about. I think Zack's job is going to be to make that generation. He's going to be there for a while, but I think they want to create Japanese main event single stars.
Would you bet that Zack Sabre Jr. ever holds the IWGP title again after this?
Oh, sure. No, I think he could. This could be a guy you can always put him in there if you need him. He's a break glass guy, like what Hiromu was. And he's always going to look legit, right? Yeah. So if something goes wrong, you can put it on. If somebody gets hurt, you can have him win the vacant title and build somebody else. Like Zack will always have the air of legitimacy, and he could get another run just because he's. Mm-hmm. I feel like my guess is that he's going to lose this thing before we get to G1, for instance. I think it'll end up with Finlay, like I mentioned. Doesn't mean that he's done with the whole thing. He is part of making this generation, and that could mean putting him back on top. Sure, there's no reason he can't.
So when we say long term, are we talking like 2 or 3 years or 5 or 6?
I mean, he didn't put a time limit on his question.
I'm just based off of when you did your 4 or 5. Like
who are the new big 4?
When your mental thing, where were you thinking? Like how far out, like years wise, were you kind of like quick, snap judgment? Were you thinking like 3 or 5 years?
Yeah, like in 2 or 3 years, I think those guys are going to be the main event mix.
I got another one that's going to be long term, and y'all ain't going to like it, but I have a feeling Evil's still going to be in that mix.
Okay. Yeah, maybe. And Gabe Kidd possibly, by the way.
Yeah,
Gabe Kidd's very much capable.
That's around the time that Gabe Kidd would be knocking on the doors of other places like WWE, because I don't know, man. I don't see him going to AEW. I feel like if he ever gets his New Japan itch totally scratched, I don't see him with Gabe Kidd potentially being kicked out of War Dogs. Do you think it would hurt him going into Hontai? I don't know if it would hurt him, but I don't think it's the right move.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he needs to maintain the edge, even if he leaves War Dogs and feuds with them. I think he needs to maintain an edge that the guys in Hontai aren't really allowed to have.
Yeah.
So that's my thought on Gabe. But I think that Gabe is a crazy good talent, and I'm curious to see. I'm less bullish on Loibe and Nakajima coming back. As to where they would be. I'd have to see how they come back from excursion. I don't see them as at the same, to be fair, at the same level as Tsuji and Oiwa as far as talent goes. I think they could be effective, but I don't see them necessarily in the main event big. So they might surprise me. Who knows? Maybe they'll go.
Barring anything unforeseen, Gabe Kidd should have an amazing 2025.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's hope he stays healthy. Let's hope everybody stays healthy. So,
all right, you want my bonus review?
Yeah, please. I'm curious to hear what you've been seeing.
So this past week or the week before, there was a match on AEW featuring two heralded New Japan talents, one being Tomohiro Ishii and the other being Kazuchika Okada. And they fought for Kazuchika Okada's Continental title. My review of this match, Steven, in 2025, is that you should, in fact, go back to the 2016 G1 match between the two and just get this one all together.
Okay. It was that much of a dud?
Ishii got hurt, and he had just had the 30-minute match with Gabe Kidd the week before at the Battle of San Jose. And Okada did a couple of the signature moves, but it was these two guys, and it was just a match.
Yeah. Good news is Ishii was back in Japan. He wrestled on these shows here, and he looked fine.
Yeah.
So whatever it wasn't long-term injury there, but it's always frustrating when you get hurt during a match and you can't quite deliver what you want to. But just didn't have the juice to it. And also, the way AEW does their TV matches, they're not often
content, man.
Yeah, they're not often set up to be classics. You do that at the pay-per-view.
Yeah, like they did a video package. It was fine, but it just felt like content. And when you're like watching these guys, and for us, where you've been watching New Japan for a while, and like AEW has an opportunity to like get New Japan fans over there and watch it. And when you put two veteran New Japan stars in a match with each other, and you're watching it, it's like, this does not hit in any way like it does in a New Japan ring. Like, is that because of the wrestlers? Is that because of the booking? Or is that because of the company?
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's hard to. I saw a comment recently from someone that just said that we mentioned that Tony Khan's a good matchmaker, but the weekly TV is a struggle. And they just said that one of his things is he doesn't quite know when to end something or pull the trigger on something and blow it off. Like things just seem to either go way too long or too short. The timing of it never quite peaks correctly. And there are a couple of things that are struggles, but I was also looking at this, and I want to have, a little bit of empathy for him. Basically, everything is a weekly territory now. And there were, everyone sees your show every week, right? So you have to put something together weekly. Back in the territory days, Memphis was a weekly territory, ran the same towns every week. So was Florida, ran the same towns every week. WWF and AWA were monthly. They had their big cities on the weekends, and they would run them once a month. They could go slower. Memphis, you couldn't do it like that. It would be too slow. You have to give the fans something interesting every single week. The reason I bring that up, the only promotions that really had successful long-term years, plural, bookers were the monthly ones. The weekly ones, they had to change it up every once in a while. The Mid-South was a weekly territory really for most of their talent, for a lot of their towns, for New Orleans and all this. And you would get, Ernie Ladd had a couple of years where he ran with it, and then they had to switch. Then that got very, very stale. They had to switch it over to Bill Dundee. Memphis, every 6 months, some form of Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, or Dundee sometimes would take the book, but they were on a 6-month schedule. That's how long somebody booked for. Other places, you would do it for a few years, but not. Tony's been doing this for 5 years straight. And yes, he has help. Yes, there are other voices in the room. But Eddie Graham in Florida ran one of the most successful territories there's been. And he had bookers, like sometimes it was Bill Watts, sometimes it was Louis Tillett, sometimes it was somebody else. He had to change that because you would just burn out. And the one thing, if we could just say anything to Tony, was like, it's okay to let go because everyone needs to refresh. And then they could take a year or two off and come back and have all these new ideas formulated in their head that are ready to go. And right now, I just think he's just struggling to put it together.
I laugh my ass off when we say shit like this, because in my mind, like, you're absolutely right. The dude's burnt, and he just needs to take a break. And we talk about how logical this is. At the same time, and I'm going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up after I make this little point. Isn't it fucking hilarious that Triple H has been pretty much booking for the last 10 years straight, and he just seems to be like,
but he has 20 or 30 people working for him, and the main event angle is done. And the main event angle is done by, and Paul Heyman's doing his main event.
Yeah, he's got guys, but it's just
Paul Heyman, the one that's drawing the crowd. Paul Heyman's writing, but Paul doesn't have to write everything else. That's a big deal. I think that division of labor is a real thing. Yeah. And
you see this guy churning along, he's delegating stories, and he's got like a group of people sharing the vision. And you think, oh, it seems to be working kind of well over there.
Like Ghetto's been the guy in charge in New Japan, again, with help and other voices in the room and other things that make decisions for him.
The Kakechi Ghetto 1-2 punch.
and Jado is involved and all that. But it's not a weekly territory. He doesn't have to fill 2 hours of TV every week with plot twists and promos and storylines. He can book cards.
To the monthly match, man.
Yeah, and so that's
he's also not like
very different job.
What I love is that you have different months out of the year where you basically have one big event. You know, it's like you've got 5 months out of the year. One of them is the Cup. One of it's the best of the Super Juniors. Then you got the G1. Then you got the Super Junior Tag League, and then you got the World Tag League. And those are hard to book. That's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work, but it takes up the majority of the programming. Then you have Fantastica Mania that's chewing up time in February, and then all of a sudden you have, April to June, which is go time for like the singles matches. Then you have the G1, and then you have the singles match go time going into Wrestle Kingdom. It's a formula every year, and they stick to it, and they have like the postmarks of where they need to be at any given time, and it just works, and I like it, and it's stable. And it's just plug and play every year, different guys for the same scenarios. This stuff's on my mind because I've been working on my history website, Ringside Replay, a lot. And it just, the way that different companies are structured fascinates me. And it makes the job of booker, which every company has a booker or a head of creative or whatever fancy title they want to have, but it's a booker. But those jobs from one company to another are very, very different jobs. It is not apples to apples. I like saying apples to apples or apples to oranges, but they are not always comparable positions. They're like Fuji to Honeycrisp. Yeah. All right. So with that in mind, thanks for indulging us on that little tangent there. But in the meantime, Jeremy, anything else before we wrap this one up? I just like filling content, just like a wrestling show will give you matches. We just fill in the content, my man. The minute to the day. I got nothing. I wanted to thank you for this program that you got me from the Tokyo Dome. You sent it to me, and I got it yesterday in the mail. This is the program for the Wrestle Kingdom. It's got all my favorite guys on there, and Ricochet, so pretty happy about that. Yeah, Wrestle Kingdom and Wrestle Dynasty, they made one program for the 2 nights, and they were selling those. It's an oversized thing. It's pretty big, full color, glossy, looks good. Game. It's very similar to an NFL game football, like game day magazine, and I'm here for that. All right, cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Yeah. All right. Well, don't forget, folks, the Power Bombshells will be back on Sunday. Their regular time. Sam and Mel will be looking at the whole world of wrestling. Joshi show on YouTube as well. Dynamite show after Dynamite. They always have an adventure to navigate that show every week, and it's a reminder, trials and tribulations. We don't mind if you want to super chat us. If you want to super chat and you want us to answer whatever question you want at that moment. Yeah, because we don't answer questions otherwise. I will I will talk about the X-Men poster I got in the back. We'll do whatever. We'll go down the rabbit hole for a super chat. I figured that came up in a conversation with our Slack today. I'm like, hell yeah, let's super chat it. But that's the first time I've ever mentioned it. I'll still talk about it for free because I'm just a whore for the attention.
Thanks to everyone who's listening to this podcast later, everyone who joined us live. We really appreciate your time. Next week, when we come back, we'll discuss that house show from Miyagi and any other news that pops up between now and then as we approach New Beginning in Osaka, which should be a loaded and exciting show. So for Jeremy Finestone, I'm Stephen Conway. This has been Speaking of Strong Style, and we'll talk to you again real soon.